Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a special Football Friday edition of Birds 365 after the Philadelphia Eagles make their first selection in the NFL draft at 31 overall. They jump up from 32 using a fifth-round pick, and they draft Jihaad Campbell, linebacker from the University of Alabama. Johnny Mack, how you doing on this Football Friday, brother, as we are about to dive in to the newest Philadelphia Eagle, obviously with a lot to go here in the NFL draft?
I'm doing it. I'm doing well. Yeah,
as good as you can, right, John?
Yeah, as good as possible. Yeah, picking 32. I think it was out of there by 2:30-ish, maybe in bed by 4-ish.
Oh, man.
And here we are again.
I was fed by 3 with the production, but other than that, man, you got me beat going to 4. So well done by you, Johnny Mack. Appreciate you being here this morning. But just your first reaction, man, for the people of Birds 365. Not everybody had a chance to consume our content last night. So your first reaction, Eagles move up from 32 to 31, a player that they said they had ranked top 10 on their board falls into their lap at 31 overall. They sent, as I mentioned, a fifth-round draft pick this year with 32 to move up that one spot. It was 164 overall, so that's off the board. Your initial reaction to what the Philadelphia Eagles did in round 1 of the NFL draft?
Yeah, I wish we could replay my interview at last night, but I know everybody's not staying up to 2:30. And I would encourage Eagles fans to listen to Howie, because Howie was pretty honest about this player, and I think there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding of this. And you were talking to me before the show about a lot of people saying this is the replacement for Nakobe Dean. It's not. He specifically said it's not. Now, again, it's a much larger role, a much more different role, a role that we haven't seen here in Philadelphia. The projection, again, this is the projection of what Vic would call a flat defender, which is part off-ball linebacker, part edge rusher. Had it in Miami. We talked about it a lot with Andrew Van Ginkel. Eagles loved Andrew Van Ginkel. Thought about bringing him in free agency, but he was coming off a serious foot injury. So they were going to have to pay a lot of money for a player they weren't sure was completely healthy, and they went in a different direction. And he ended up, by the way, Andrew ended up being a second-team All-Pro, so he did just fine. But that's sort of the template. If you want to go back to their season together in Miami, that's the template that the Eagles are envisioning with Jihaad Campbell. And whether it works out is another, that's there aren't a lot of players like that in the NFL. So whether it works out is a question. That's a lot to put on a plate of a young player. I'm not sure if it works out. So then you have the versatility. Is he a stacked linebacker? Is he an edge rusher?
Right.
And just from the little hints, now Howie was very, very careful to not pigeonhole him into either, even though we tried to get him to answer it 50 different ways, because he wants him to be everything. But if he can't handle it, then, where does he default to? Where does he go back to? And I think, as you saw in the lead up to the draft, most people had him as a off-ball linebacker, stacked linebacker, number 1 in the class at that particular position. If that's the case, first off-ball linebacker the Eagles have taken in the first round of the draft since Jerry Robinson. You're going to hear that probably a lot. Or he's going to play the edge. And that's where I think he belongs. The question is, can he be a full-time edge player at his size, which is basically 6'1", 235. Now, I don't know if he slipped, but how he made the Penn State comparison, and what he's talking about is Micah Parsons, and he's talking about Abdul Carter, who both played off ball at Penn State, but ended up as edge rushers. In the case of Micah Parsons, for people that don't remember, he wasn't drafted. He was drafted as a linebacker, an off ball linebacker.
Right.
And then they had a bunch of injuries, and they said, all right, we got to play him at edge rusher. And he was so good, they never moved him. But he's still versatile. He still does some things. Stand-up rusher. Another thing Van Ginkel does, you can move him inside on obvious.
And he is pretty good in coverage, too. I mean, that's one of his not specialties, but he's – yeah.
And that's the flat defender. You saw, again, right. We're going to talk a lot about Van Ginkel. You saw 2 pick sixes. He probably could have had 5.
Right.
Because he dropped a couple. That's part of it, coverage. That it is a very big job if you want to put somebody in that particular position. And that seems to be what the Eagles are projecting, envisioning with this particular player. But if that doesn't work out at the whole encompassing role, which is edge rusher, flat defender, off-ball linebacker, depending on weak opponent, who's available in a particular game. If that entire role doesn't manifest itself, he can't handle all that, then I think, all right, what's the default setting? And I think most people would say linebacker. Ultimately, it's up to Vic. And as you saw, he's pretty good with linebackers and figuring out where they belong. That's his expertise. And he figured it out pretty quickly with Zach Vaughn. Ultimately, it's up to him. But if I were a betting man, I would say he's an edge rusher.
So last night, John, because after our conversation last night, I started to look into the player a little bit before I went to bed. And I want to give credit to Elliot Shore Parks from WIP, but I want you to tell me if you agree with this. So he tweeted out, Elliot, the key to understanding this pick by the Eagles is to view it like this. Jihaad Campbell is an edge that can play off-ball linebacker, not an off-ball linebacker that can play edge. He will rush the passer and then be moved around to utilize other skills, but edge is first. In your estimation, do you think that's an accurate description?
Yeah. Good job, Elliot. I'm surprised. That's exactly what I just said. Yeah. Yes. That's exactly what it is. Yes. Again, they want the bigger role. But if they can't, and he has to default to one, he's going to be an edge rusher. I felt that way about Micah Parsons.
Right.
Turned out, luckily, I was correct. Feel that way about Abdul Carter. Feel that way about Jihaad Campbell. Now, those guys are higher level of prospects, but similar types of traits we're talking about. But yeah, this is the type of player that Vic wants. He wants this role in this defense. You even see him try to do it very, very spare. When he doesn't have the player to do it, he still does it. He throws in the curveball and a lot of people did it. Jonathan Gannon did it. People who run this scheme, where you see whether it's Josh Sweat dropping into coverage or Bryce Huff dropping into coverage. Picture that, but with somebody who can do it, more comfortable doing it, more effective doing it. And it just adds another pitch to your arsenal if you're Vic Fangio. But you're always looking for those curveballs. And this guy is athletic enough. And one of the things about when he moved, because he came to Alabama as an edge rusher, and they had some injuries, and he had to move. And he was pretty good in coverage, which is rare. You expect him to be, all right, he's such a great athlete. Maybe he's just chasing people down. And there's part of that in college, but he was also pretty darn good in coverage. So this guy's going to be more comfortable than Hassan Reddick dropping into coverage, or in theory, and we'll see how it plays out. But Yeah, the Eagles obviously liked him and we're keeping it under wraps. This is one player that I didn't focus on because I was looking at ceiling players, but this is a ceiling player. So I got that part of it right. They were looking for a guy with a huge ceiling. So whether that would be Walter Nolan, I focused on Walter Nolan and Shamar Stewart, who went earlier.
Yeah, 16 and 17 back to back.
But this is another guy that they think has a huge ceiling, and that's what they were looking for at the bottom of the first round. And they tried to trade all the way up to 22 to get him. I don't know who they thought was going to take him, but obviously nobody did between 22 and 31. They moved up from 32 to 31 to make sure. So they obviously had some thought that someone was going to come up to get him. But he had shoulder surgery in March. That helped when it came to him slipping a little bit. Because in most of the process, I had him going much earlier than 31. And I think most people did. But I did mention this week, for those who was listening, there were two names that came out about potential injury issues. One was Campbell and the other was Will Johnson, who a lot of people had as the first or second corner to go, and he's still on the board. So that some teams were concerned with those two players from an injury standpoint.
So versatile, our version of Andrew Van Ginkel has landed. He is not a replacement for Nakobe Dean. All right, it is not about that. It's about off the edge. I'll give you guys a little rundown on Jihaad Campbell. 6'3", depending on where you look, 235 it says on the NFL.com, 245 it says other places. I've even seen 250 some places. So let's just call him 240 for now. 6'3", a 4'5", 240, and 9.88 relative athletic score, Johnny Mac. So we talked about how the Eagles like those guys with high RAS scores. Well, there you go. That's a really high one for Jihaad Campbell. So he's a versatile player. I'm really excited to see how Vic Fangio lines him up. John, what does it mean for the lineup on the field? Like, if he's not going to be the off-ball linebacker, obviously, and let's just assume Nakobe Dean's healthy for a second. So you got Bourne and Dean. Like, is he taking the spot of where Sweat would be on the field? Is that how you would say it? You know, like who?
Well, I would think. Yeah, I would think if you think about it from the standpoint of, third and long, 3rd and 10 plus, obvious set passing situations, he's one of the 4 guys you want on the field rushing the passer.
Right.
I would think. Doesn't mean that starts that way. People forget Cooper DeJean, it took to week 5 before they pulled the trigger. Should have pulled it earlier, but but the goal is, the goal would be to get him on the field. So, and obviously that means with Nolan Smith and likely, at least for now, Jalen Carter and Moro Ajomo, that would be your NASCAR package, whatever you want to call it. Now, it's, you mentioned the weights, the fluctuating weights. Well, at the combine, it's 235. So he's 235.
Right.
Now you can go up, you can go, hope they don't want him to go down, but
no, he's got it. But the thing is, like, you brought up Micah. Micah's 6'3", 245, 250. So like that his size is right in that range. Let's say he puts on 10 pounds. He's a rookie player. So I think over time he will put on, a couple pounds, but he's the right size, man, to do this. So I think it could work out. And with the athleticism, I mean, seems like they got great value, John, at 31, because that's also a big part of the first round too that people miss on. Like, I was laughing at the Cowboys pick, 12. I like Tyler Booker. It's not even a problem with Tyler Booker, but bro, take him at 27, trade back, like get value out of what you have, the assets that you have to make a better football team. I think the Eagles got a great value pick here at 31.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying, it's true. They were trying to get up. They thought they had a deal with the Chargers at 22, and they were going to take him at 22. So I mean, they weren't bull, whating when it comes to wanting the player, having a great grade on the player. And so ultimately, and you're right, but it was a little bit of a different draft. And that's where I give some of these teams a little bit more of a pass than I typically would when it comes to maybe guys that I deem as not a value for that particular spot, because the boards were so wacky and the ranges for the prospects. So this was a draft which is more of, all right, if you like a player, just take him. So I'll give some of these teams from that standpoint a little bit of deference. But yeah, in the case of the Cowboys, I mean, my issue with the Cowboys, not at all. I think they should have, but I thought they would go wide receiver. I thought offensive line was a much bigger issue for them because of all the attrition they've had over the past couple of years. I just, I think Donovan Jackson's better. Now, I wouldn't have taken him at 12. I think Ray Zabel's better, and I wouldn't taken him at 12 than Booker. So, I don't necessarily like their choice, but if you like the player, you like the player. It's like if I'm the 33rd team, sorry, Joe Banner, but if I'm the 33rd team, I got my board, but that doesn't mean my board's right. And if they like them and they're confident, and obviously I talk about Will McClay all the time, it's definitely more of a personnel group pick than a Jerry Jones pick. So I don't have as much problem with it as most people would, I would say.
We'll get
especially in this draft.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the rest of the draft as well here today. We obviously are going to talk about round 2 and 3 as well, which is tonight. A lot of good players on the board, everybody. So the Eagles sitting at 64 and 96 tonight. What will they do? I'm expecting them to shake and bake and, maybe package up some picks and move up in those rounds unless they like a player or they think they're in a good spot where they are. But a lot of good players remaining still on the board. So tons of people there, including a lot of players who are in on top 30 visits for the Philadelphia Eagles. So we will get into that. John, talk to me about this injury. He had a surgery last month. I believe it's a torn labrum, if I'm not mistaken, in the shoulder. So now the Eagles medical staff cleared him. Yeah. I tend to trust them because they've been pretty good at this stuff over the years. But your thoughts on the injury? Tell us a little bit about it, and then if it concerns you at all.
No, I think people get caught up in the moment. Is he going to be ready for OTAs? No. And who cares? I mean, he's 21 years old. He's going to be healthy at some point. Right. So no, from that standpoint, you might have to wait a little bit. He might, will he be ready for the first play of training camp? Maybe not, but who cares? He's 21. Right. There's plenty of time. So I think people get, and it's not an injury that's going to be chronic or degenerative. Most likely, again, at 21, you never say never because it is football. And that's how he described it. He got hurt, football injury. I mean, trying to tackle people. Right. It happens. But again, Nolan Smith, I talked about with the torn triceps, same type of thing. He's going to be back. He's going to be healthy. The one thing you worry about, again, is the lack of size. And you're pushing and pulling on at 235, 240, you're pushing and pulling on 300, often 20-pound offensive tackles.
I think he can put on some
maybe a little bit more susceptible. Well, there's a give and take to that. Some people, like I talked about Jalix Hunt. Jalix Hunt has the frame for it. I don't know, and I haven't seen Jihaad in person yet, so we'll see. But like Nolan doesn't have the frame to put on a whole bunch of weight. Jalix does. And then you have to are you giving up some explosion? All this factors into it. And, I think Micah Parsons has proved a lot of things to a lot of people in this league. Because he's got shorter arms and he doesn't, and nobody can block him. but again, there's a give and take to that because Aaron Donald's the same way at defensive tackle. But to assume that, I always bring up Kalijah Cansey and Ed Oliver when you're talking about it. People made those comparisons to Aaron Donald, and they're both good players, but they ain't Aaron Donald. I'm surprised how he brought up the Cowboys thing, and he was talking about it. He didn't say the word Micah or Abdul Carter, the Penn State thing, not the Cowboys thing. So he made it obvious who he was talking about. And I'm surprised because, he's probably going to be the Ed Oliver of this type, which is a good player, darn good player. But, he's not going to be Micah Parsons. If you're playing the odds.
Doesn't seem like you love the pick. Am I reading it wrong, or do you not like the value for that type of player at 31? Like, is there any concern you have?
No, I have no problem with the value, the pick. You're picking 31st. First of all, you're picking 31st. I mean, you're not getting Micah Parsons at 31, most likely. Occasionally, guys hit. But I don't like those comparisons for anybody. I don't like the comparisons for. I got to take the Cowboys part out of it. You can go this year with Abdul Carter. Same thing. It's not Abdul Carter. Just like Cansey wasn't Aaron Donald. He's Aaron Donald. He went to Pitt. No, he's not. Those guys are different, and because they did it doesn't mean every 6'2", 280-pound guys good in college can do it at the same level. In the same case with, guys who shouldn't be good at edge rusher, but are good at edge rusher because they're so physically gifted. And to a lesser degree, Nolan Smith has some of that as well. Like, he shouldn't be as good as he is as an edge rusher. But they are. And but Vic knows this position. Like, this is Vic. I always talk about manufactured touch people, gadget players on offense. And I don't like them for most coaches. For Kyle Shanahan, I say, all right, I'll think about it.
Yeah,
he's going to utilize them. Vic is going to utilize. He created this position at the NFL level, basically. Other people use it. Flores uses it, but he kind of created it. And if anybody's going to use it correctly, it's going to be Vic Fangio.
So here's where he ranked on the final big boards for everybody, just so people know. We drafted him at 31 overall, and Howie said the Eagles had him at their top 10. Daniel Jeremiah had him 12th on his big board. PFF had him 13th on the big board. The Ringer had him 11th, and Todd McShay had him 11th. So the Eagles land him at 31. Obviously, a guy who was, ranked higher than where they got him, and he fell a little bit, I would assume, because of the shoulder injury. So an interesting pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. I love it. I mean, not only because he's a Bama kid, I just think he got great value. I thought the board fell to you perfectly, and you walk with a player that really not many of us expected, John. I mean, we talked about the draft. How many hours, John, leading up to this sucker? I mean, we mentioned Campbell, but he wasn't in our top 5, 10 guys that I think we thought the Eagles were going to take. And, I didn't see many people anywhere talking about this guy as a potential draft pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think most people thought he was going to be way off the board, to be honest with you. But, he falls to you, and another Alabama SEC player falls to the Birds, and you take him at 31. So Howie, per se, does it again, and let's see how the player does. But another great value pick for the Birds.
Yeah, I think the injury helped. I think, most, including myself, thought, all right, there's no way he's going to be there, so why talk about it? Then the injury I always talk about. Two things that can affect that are injury and background stuff. Mike Green is still on the board, people. And that's information we don't have. Nobody has, except the teams themselves. Now Jeremiah dropped Campbell in his last draft, so he deserves credit for it. And obviously he knew. And he's got a strong relationship with Howie, but Howie might be pissed at him because he knew. And the second part is I did not think the Eagles would look at him as an edge rusher. And it seems that they are, which I think is a big positive. Because I've said it from the start. To me, he looks like an edge rusher. And he is an edge rusher. You know, and I like the way Elliott described it. You know, he's an edge rusher first, and he played off ball linebacker, and he can play off ball linebacker, but he's an edge rusher first in the body of an off ball linebacker.
Yeah,
like Micah Parsons, and that's where the comp comes in.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think I'm not too concerned on the side. I know he's a little small, but he is 21 years old right now. So obviously has plenty of room to grow into his body. The main thing on here is, John, like, when are we talking on getting on the field? You know, torn labrum, had surgery in March. You know, many say it's a 6 to 8 month recovery on the timetable for that. So, you know, forget training camp. I don't think he's going to be there for training camp. Is he going to be ready for week 1? You know, I do think you're right where you have time. You know, you can let the player get healthy, but, you know, what does that look like? When is he going to be available for this season? And there are people out there, John, who are concerned about this injury. I think you're good because the Eagles checked off on it. You know, it's nothing chronic, as you pointed out, John, but I don't know what the timetable is going to be or when we can expect him, you know, to be a contributor on the defense.
Well, you know, same with Cooper DeJean getting hurt right before training camp, you know, much less serious, not surgery, but that pushed him back 4 weeks, essentially, a whole month into the season. Yeah, you might have something like that. You know, the injury probably, you know, limits the opportunity to be that day one starter a little bit. But ultimately, like I said, who cares? He's 21. He's 21 years old. That's the thinking of bad teams who passed him over because, oh, he's not going to be ready for training camp, or, oh, he's 21 years old. Again, patience, to have the patience and some GMs don't have that patience. Some GMs aren't allowed that patience. Howie has that luxury and say, all right, well, you know, It might be the second half of the season, but ultimately I'm going to have a good player. And he's got a very good team to persevere before he gets the very good player. So it's a lot easier for the Eagles to do it. But I mean, long term, like literally, who cares? He's going to be fine. Short term, yeah, you're not going to get pictures of him at OTAs other than on the sidelines.
Right.
All right, who cares?
Well, if people spend a first round pick, John, they want to see him on the field, man. That's just going to be the nature
I
of the
mean,
beast.
they have to change their thinking. I don't know what to tell them. Do you want to be these
can.
teams that are like, oh, I'm not going to have this kid in April and May, well, not April, in May and June and July, and I'm not going to take him because of that, and you're not even playing games? I mean, that's part of the reason these bad teams are bad teams, because they're like, well, he can't play right away. I can't take him.
Well, no, I mean, here's how I look at it, because I hear you. I mean, what are we worried about June and July for? But, you know, you drafted Nakobe Dean, who had some injuries coming out of college. He spent a lot of time since he's been here injured. You know, you drafted Nolan Smith, who had some injuries, especially with the shoulder coming out of college. As good of a player as he turned into last year, he's now back on the injury list. So, you know, I think people look at players who come out with injuries like this and say, like, are they concerned that he might, you know, continue to have injuries? I know you don't like that when people say, you know, players are injury prone or whatever, but I do think it's a fair thing to at least bring up and talk about.
Well, I don't think it's predictable. Like, it's, you know, if it was, it would be easy. So that's one of those things where, if I heard it one time from a football coach, I've heard it a million times. Control what you can control. And there's difference between certain injuries, and that's where you rely on your doctors. And there's a lot of kids that'll come out with degenerative knee issues, and that will be a big concern. Miles Jack, who was an Eagle for a couple weeks, couple years ago, I remember him coming out. He people were talking about him like he was a top 5 pick, and all of a sudden he goes in the second round because everybody had concern over a degenerative knee issue. And he was a good player for a pretty long time, and it didn't end up. DK Metcalf with the neck injury. A lot of teams were scared off by that. And he's still playing. He's still playing at a high level. So, I mean, all you can do in that instance is rely on your medical staff. And the reason I don't like it is because it's ridiculous to try to this guy is going to get hurt. Nolan tore his triceps in the Super Bowl. I mean, it happens. It's football. That's how Jihaad said it. He was asked how he got hurt in the bowl game, but he didn't want to talk about the injury much, and certainly understandably, but he basically called it just a football thing. I was trying to tackle people hard.
And he tweaked his shoulder.
Yeah. So it's more of not that I don't like it or I like it, or it's just control what you can control. I mean, you rely on your medical people. They give them the pat. But when I compare it to other teams, I look at it more as, all right, well, they're in the moment and he's not going to be available right away. And they say, I need somebody that's available right away, whether it's to save my job or make sure I'm having my job. And they can't have patience. And the Eagles have the luxury of patience, and Howie Roseman has the luxury of patience. And from his process, all I'm trying to say is he's 21 years old. He's going to be fine. When he's going to be fine, officially 100% fine, I don't know, but he's going to be fine. And ultimately, if that's week 1 or week 7 or week 8, where he turns into a contributor, that might get pushed back a little bit, but the goal is to be, I think if you've seen the difference between 2023 and 2024, the goal is to play your best football late. Even in the regular season when the games do matter. Cooper wasn't even playing that first month, Cooper DeJean. But by the end, he's playing pretty well.
Right. If you look back, would you not have taken Cooper because of the injury? No, you wouldn't.
And Cooper fell a little bit, not a ton, but, most people had him graded as a first-round pick.
Right.
And the injury he suffered in training camp had nothing to do with the injuries in college that he fell a little bit with, but he fell a little bit because of injury concerns. It's a short-sighted, another example of a short-sighted way of thinking by many NFL GMs.
Yep.
Now, again, there's different injuries, knees, necks. They have the potential to be more long-term, significant potential issues. And that's why there's more concern. Ben Morrison, that's going to be an interesting player today.
Man, I think he's a great option day 2.
But that injury is more concerning. So, right. You have to do a lot more due diligence on it. So, and from the Eagles standpoint, just from an Eagles centric view, do you really want to take one guy's injured and another guy that's injured? Probably not. So I'm probably taking Benjamin Morrison off the board.
Right.
And
Will Johnson too, man. Now his is really scary. Will Johnson's with the knee, but man, he was a guy that was once talked about like as a top 10 pick shoe-in type of player, and he's still on the board going into round 2. So unfortunate for him, but we'll talk about that too. We're going to get into who's available going into round 2. and 3 tonight. That kicks off tonight, day 2 of the NFL draft. Still a ton of players out there. Will Johnson, I just mentioned, Mike Green, Emanwari, Donovan Ezeraku. I thought they were taking Ezeraku there at 31. Darius Alexander. You got Shadur.
So did Ed Kratz. Ed Kratz was ready to spike the football.
Yeah, man. He was on Birds.
He had the football. Yep. He had the football ready to go. He was ready to spike the football. Man. And Howie took it away from him.
Howie did. Took it right out of Ed Kratz's hand. John, last question for you here until we move into round 2. I also want to ask you about some of the rest of the draft. I thought it was a great round 1 last night. Just a lot of good moving parts, a lot of interesting storylines, and we'll talk about some of those. How do you think this pick kind of reflects the overall, defensive philosophy moving forward? Does it change at all? Do you expect them to run a lot more NASCAR, which is with a lot more defensive ends on the field? Or do you think it's kind of just business as usual? He's going to plug in where Sweat or another edge would be, and it looks the same.
No, well, no, he's a different type of player, as I said. So in theory, he's going to expand Vic's ability to do what he wants to do on the front. In theory, in the laboratory, until you get to see it on the field. Can he handle that role? It's a very big role. And Van Ginkel's the guy that they're basing it on. If you want to look at film, go look at film. Go look at the way Andrew Van Ginkel plays. That's how he's going to play. If he can. Which again is a very big role. And it's probably not going to start out that way. So then it becomes to what Elliot was saying. And I think Elliot phrased it correctly. He's more edge rusher than linebacker. And the Eagles gave 2 hints to that. One, the guy talking to him was Jeremiah Washburn, who was the edge rushing coach.
I picked up on that.
And 2, Howie's mention of the Penn State guys, which is in reference to Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter. So more edge who can play linebacker than linebacker who can play edge. I would agree with that sentiment. But the goal is to get them to play both and have that hybrid sort of player that they haven't had to this point. And they haven't been able to get. But they've been looking for it. But again, there's probably 4 or 5 guys in the league that play. There aren't a lot of.
No, there's not. Yeah, there's definitely not a lot of these type of dudes. By the way, I think has pros and cons. Whenever you hear there's not a lot of them in the league, like there's advantages to that. But John, it kind of reminds me of what you always say with like I don't like gadgets. I don't like gimmicks. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying if it's not like a traditional pick, there is the potential for that downside. But I'll default to Vic Fangio, similar to what you said.
Well, yeah, and I said, I always say that, but when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, I say, all right, I'll take a look at it. And with Vic, same thing on defense.
Yep, I agree. Let's get to some super chats here. JD3 checks in. What's up, everybody? Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Hit that like button for us. Big round 1 for the Birds in the books. They move up to 31 and take JAKIB Campbell from the University of Alabama. Roll Tide, baby. JD3 checks in. Eagles now have their version of Luvu Van Ginkel. Please don't draft tight end today and blackball my guy, all-pro Harrison Bryant. J-Mac knows the deal.
We got our Harrison Bryant. Who is our Harrison Bryant?
JD3, man. He's the best. We love Harrison Bryant.
Frankie Luvu. No, he doesn't. They're not. Yeah, I don't know why he's getting lumped in. He's not.
Definitely Van Ginkel, but yeah, why Luvu?
Yeah. So that, but yeah, I don't. But they're looking for, they're looking for what Vic calls his flat defender, which is the guy who can play the edge and drop in coverage, occasionally play off ball linebacker, occasionally rush from inside. That's the template they're going for. To me, it's not about can they get there. It is about how long term. It's about can they get there. Short term, it's about where does he start. You probably don't give him that whole plate to start. And that, I believe, he will start more as an edge rusher than an off-ball linebacker for two reasons. One, the Eagles have an all-pro off-ball linebacker that they just paid a lot of money to. And two, the middle linebackers, Nakobe Dean. And if Nakobe's not ready to go for week one, Jeremiah Trotter would play that role. I don't think Jihaad would be the middle linebacker anyway. And evidently Howie thinks the same way. So if you don't believe me, because I know there's a lot of people that have gone down that route, just go read Howie's transcript or watch Howie's press conference. Yeah. So, and again, injuries can change everything. And if he's their best option and Trotter falls on his face, I'm not saying they couldn't throw him in there for a couple weeks. That's the whole point of having a versatile player, almost a positionless player in the front seven. In theory, he can play all over. That's the hope. But little short bursts out of position. You don't want him there long term.
Right.
But ultimately, if it boils down and he can't handle this all-encompassing role, which is a possibility you have to bring up, what did they scale back to? And I think they scale back to edge rusher more than off-ball linebacker. And I think they gave a couple of hints to that belief.
Yes. Brian Pumper checks in. What's up, Brian Pump? Appreciate you, brother. He says Eagles drafted the next Fred Warner, and all you Starks fanboys getting freaking wrecked.
Well, Pumper, come on, dude. Come on.
He did not want Malachi Starks, Pumper.
First of all, the comp of the All-Pro, number one. Don't do it. It's not fair. Second of all, Fred Warner is, a middle linebacker. He played, and I'm just looking it up, played 15 snaps on the defensive line. That is an awful comparison. He's not coming here to be the middle linebacker.
Right.
Again, if you don't believe me, listen to Howie. I'm not asking you to believe me. And I'm not even saying, hey, look, and by the way, if Vic Fangio gets his hands on him, because Zach Bond didn't come here to play weak side linebacker. And if Vic sees something and says, you know what, I think this kid could be an all-ball linebacker. He'll do what he wants. So I'll leave that door open. But if you listen to Howie, the scouting staff, he's not here to play middle linebacker. So come on, Pump. Fred Warner.
Dirty Air checking in. What's up, Dirty Air? Hope you're doing good, brother. He says, so you think a reason he fell besides the shoulder is because of his versatility, harder for coaches to figure out a role? I think that's actually fair.
I think he's a tweener in most coaches' mind. Because a tweener does he's not big enough to play the edge.
Right.
He's not a traditional all-ball linebacker. Yeah, and a lot of teams are scared off by tweeners because they have more traditional like I said, offensively, Vic's the Kyle Shanahan of defense. Like he will utilize players like that. Well, you can make an argument for Flores as well. They will utilize people like this. They have proven there's demonstrated performance that they would lose versatile. One of my favorite players, people listen to the show, Pumper will get more Vikings, is Josh Metellus because he plays all over. Played 13 different positions 2 years ago. There's only 11 on the field.
Do you think he's that undersized? Like I'm looking up Nolan Smith that has him listed 6'2", 238.
I haven't seen him yet. But yeah, he measured at 235 at the combine. I mean, Nolan's very small. I say it all the time for an edge rusher.
I mean, he's not big, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's 235 right now. That doesn't mean he can't grow to 245. He's a little bit taller than Nolan, I believe. So we'll see that part of it. I mean, that's more of a concern of like at some point, if you have so many light players on the field. But Howie mentioned that's the way the game's going. So they're trying to stay ahead of the curve. And we'll see if somebody can take advantage of some of these undersized players. But again, teams don't have patience. Howie counts on that. So they don't have patience to copy what the Eagles did. And because remember, you can talk about Saquon, but how many years of investment did the Eagles put in the offensive line to get, Lane's 35 years old.
Right.
Jordan Mailata was a 7th round pick, and it took 3 years. Landon Dickerson got thrown in right away, but was a high 2nd round pick. Cam Jurgens, 2nd round pick. On and on and on. These significant, and years prior and all that. And Jeff Stoutland and the coaching and the projects and the development. Incredible investment. Whereas you look at Chicago, which I think has done a good job of rebuilding their offensive line finally in the offseason. But, they're just picking free agent. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But the Eagles have took this long-term investment in the offensive line, and other teams don't have the patience to do that. The vast majority.
Yep. Suo Blaze checks in. What's up, Suo? Appreciate everybody being here this morning, by the way. Hit that like button for us. Suo says, we got my guys. He said this months ago with Sills. I'm so effing pumped. Can't believe he fell to us. Him and Vaughn going to go crazy. Let's see how it is, Suo. I'm happy we got your guy. Johnny Mac's rolling his eyes at you because he's not going to be a linebacker. We'll see. John, I told you we talked about it last night. There's a little bit of an esoteric nature to this pick. All right. That's just the nature of the beast here. Vulnerable Vitality checks in with $10. Thank you, brother. I'm going to puke when Luther Burden goes to an NFC East team. Anywho, go effing Birds. Great pick by the Eagles. Greater coverage by you guys. Let's have a great day too. Thank you, Vulnerable. Appreciate it, brother. Luther Burden's a very nice player. I know you're a Missouri guy, so appreciate you checking in. Prince Swayze checked in.
You wanted the Eagles, but real quick to vulnerable.
No, I don't think he wants Luther. Bro, I don't know. Maybe he does. I know he's a Missouri guy.
Come
so
on. The Eagles aren't taking a wide receiver.
No, I think he's just talking about, he likes Luther Burden, so he doesn't want to see him go to a team that he roots against.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I think that's what he's going for. Prince Swayze checks in. What's up, Prince? For the Falcons to give up a first-round pick for a late-round player is poor management. That could lead to the GM firing, especially with next year's draft being loaded with talent. I have no idea what that Falcons GM is doing. I really don't.
Yeah, I would add Jacksonville, Jeff Carson coming to life at the top of the draft. Yeah. I say it all the time. There's some dumb teams, some dumb executives. Now, Atlanta has had a very, very difficult time trying to find pass rushers over the years. And they went with Jalen Walker, who's another sort of undersized guy. A lot of those guys. And to Howie's point about the game changing, and then they carpet bombed it with James Pierce. So it is a very important position, but to do it at that stage, obviously they thought somebody was going to take James Pierce. Is it Baltimore? Detroit? I would say maybe Detroit more than Baltimore.
Yeah.
I always talk about Eagles-y picks. I think the most Eagles-y pick in the first round would have been Walter Nolan, who obviously went 16 to our old buddy, Jonathan Gannon, but didn't have an opportunity for the Eagles, who started thinking about trading up at 22. So we'll never know. We'll know at some point. Howie will talk to us about how much interest they had in Walter Nolan, but the most on-brand pick to me in the first round was Baltimore with Starks.
Yeah.
So I don't think they were taking him. Detroit might have taken him. But I mean, all right. So you lose out on James Pierce. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the player. I'm certainly not giving up a future one for him.
No, me neither.
But again, if you like the player, show the courage of your convictions. Everybody is so clearly defined. The first thing you have to admit about the draft is none of us know. Now, these teams are doing more homework than anybody in our realm, whether it's fan or even media. They have more information. And if you believe in a player, yeah, I have no problem with that. But on the surface, as a media person, it looks like he gave up a lot for something that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of what the
But
Falcons
if he turns into an all-pro, it all evaporates.
That's true. No doubt. Rich checks in. What's up, Rich? How many picks we making today, Z? I'm going to say, well, we got 2 right now. I'm going to stick with 2. I think they make 2. Maybe they move up with them, but I'm going to stick with 2. John, how many do you think they make today?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with 2 because they'd have to probably give up a future pick to get another one. Which again is possible. You've seen it in the past with Kaylee Ringo. They gave up a future 3rd to get up in the 4th. They might give up a future 3rd to get up in the 3rd this year, get up higher. Something like that. But I doubt it. Yeah. But they do have a number. They got to repopulate things, like I said.
Yeah.
In the secondary, in theory, they got to find a tight end, defensive tackle. They still got to repopulate this defense. They got a nice player. I'm sure Vic's happy, but he's still saying, "Hey, we lost a bunch of fucking guys." I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, John, but I see the Vic Fangio effect on Howie Roseman, man. He signs Zach Bond, goes and drafts Jihaad Campbell. I see it.
No,
I see it. Fangio's rubbing off on Howie. He's clearly got some say in there, Johnny Mac.
Look, one thing I love about Vic is he's honest to a fault. He had nothing to do with Zach Bond. The Zach Bond was after he got here. Looking at him and changing. The Eagles signed Zach Bond.
Him in. Oh, I meant paying him this year.
Oh, yeah, paying him. Yeah, I thought you meant bringing him in.
No, not bringing him in.
Nothing to do with that.
Yeah, he was not supposed to be anything. Let's be real. Nobody thought he was going to be anything.
Yeah. Well, people have changed that out.
Well, obviously that, yeah. But when he was signed, no. Kimbos checks in. Kimbos does not like the pick, John. So not everybody likes the pick. Kimbo says, I think we should have got a vet for that role. I saw Kimbos in the chat earlier saying he just doesn't have a good feeling about the player. So any concerns from your front, John, for the people that, might not like the pick? Just shed some light on that side of the aisle.
Well, I mean, who are you going to get? Who you're going to get as a veteran to fill that role? Like, Eagles fans haven't even seen this role, and they may never see it. I mentioned that on the show. You've never seen this player, this type of player, what they are envisioning for this player. It has never been here before. You've seen little hints of it, and most Eagles fans hated it when Hassan Reddick would drop into coverage or Josh Sweat would drop into coverage. A, because they're not good at it. B, it was just a bit of a curveball because they didn't have anybody who was good at it. And it was more about fooling the quarterback than anything else. So I don't think most Eagles fans won't even know because they've never seen it before. that if it doesn't work out, then it becomes, all right, is he a good edge rusher? Is he a good off-ball linebacker? Because they'll eventually default back into what's his best position. And then it'll become a more normalized situation. So, yeah, I don't know about a veteran other than, and the Eagles seriously considered signing Van Ginkel last year, but
Right.
he was not healthy, and they knew they were not going to be able to clear him before outlaying significant money, and they didn't feel comfortable with it. Now, it turned out he was a second-team All-Pro. But the Eagles won the Super Bowl, so, I mean, it worked out, and they had the number one defense.
Right.
But they didn't have a player in that role, which they did it a different way. And if they have to do it in a different way and it doesn't work out, they'll do it in a different way.
Great stuff there. Great first hour here on Birds 365 this morning. Appreciate everybody being here. Johnny Mac working on low rest. I'm working on low rest. We were up late, but I'm still fired up. All right. Big pick for the Birds last night, but we just broke down Jihaad Campbell, everything that, his role, what it might be, what it looks like, what the Eagles, did in the NFL draft. In hour number 2 here, what we're going to do is we are going to look at the first round. I want to talk to John about what he thinks is what some of the other teams did. I know we're an Eagles show, but I do like to talk about what some of the other teams did. And then in the back half of hour 2, we will dive into round 2 and 3, which are coming up tonight. Best players available, fits for the Eagles, what direction they may go, position groups to target. Is it secondary? Is it defensive tackle, edge? Where might they go there? So we'll talk about all that here in hour number 2. Appreciate you guys being here. Johnny Mac, let's start with last night's draft. And we'll go from top to bottom. I mean, you already kind of talked about what the Browns did, or what the Jaguars did moving up. I think the number 1 overall pick was pretty obvious. They went with Cam Ward, but we'll go to number 3 and we'll work our way down. We'll start with the guys who have the teams that have the most impact to the Philadelphia Eagles. For once, John, I think the Giants did the smart moves. I'm not saying I like the quarterback or the quarterback's going to change the franchise, but the old Giants would have just taken Dart at number 3 and left the value on the board. They take Abdul Carter, I think the best player in the NFL draft. They trade back in at the end of the first round, 25 overall, and they take their quarterback in Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders, by the way. Your thoughts on what the Giants did in this NFL draft?
Well, I like what the Giants are doing on the defensive front. I mean, they are freaking loaded on the defensive front. But it's hard to win in this league unless you find the quarterback. And do I believe in Jackson Dart to be that quarterback? No, I do not.